Hello and welcome to Jaws of Data. My name is Dave, Data Science for Curious People. In this video I want to ask the question, has the West miscalculated Russia and the war in Ukraine? This is from my blog. So I'm going to go through some of the facts and really ask the question, have we actually miscalculated this whole thing? Contemplating Russia and the war in Ukraine through the lens of population and GDP. So yeah, let's go for it. And sorry about the background and poor video quality. I need to get myself set up properly. Right, let's get going. So the recent UN General Assembly voted to condemn the Russian attacks on Ukraine. Here's the source. And what was quite interesting is that 141 countries favored this, so they condemned the Russian attacks. 35 abstained and 5 were against. In the 5 that were against, you have Russia, Belarus, and some others. But in the 35 that abstained, you had China, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. So let's think about this bit of data here a little bit more. Because if you look at this chart here, you would think to yourself, the Russians are finished and the West is going to, well, these countries, not specifically the West, but although this represents certainly Western democratic ideals by and large, we would think that Russia is finished. But let's think about this a little bit more. China and India have the largest populations. According to the most recent data from 2022, China and India combined have over 36% of the world's population. That's massive. And if you just take a look at this chart, look how small the US, Indonesia, Pakistan, Brazil, Nigeria, Bangladesh is compared to India and China. Now, let's just include Pakistan in here because they voted to abstain, and Bangladesh, plus these other countries. We could be sitting at over 50% of the world by population support or outright favorable towards the Russian invasion, or at least show some level of support. That is a very interesting number. So when you look here, the number of people represented here is, you're probably looking at only about 50% of the world's population. So that changes this. Let's now move on to GDP. So the countries in the world with the largest GDP, America still sits on top with over 20 trillion. This was according to the World Bank. Then you have China sitting with 14, just under 15, 14.7 trillion. And then you've got these other countries. Now, India sits in here as well in the top 7. So India and China, who both abstained, are both in the top 7 countries in the world, the highest GDP, which is obviously, GDP tells you how profitable that country has, its gross domestic product, the size of the economy and how much it's growing. So it gives you an idea of its economic clout. And this data really makes me wonder if the West is miscalculated. And I say in my conclusion here, I say these facts and others make me wonder if the sanctions placed on Russia are pointless. Because think about it, Russia can do business with China and India, among other countries. Why does Russia even need the West? And so in some ways its sanctions are pointless. Will Russia, who is a very poor country economically, we know that, but it's very rich in its resources, be largely unaffected because they have other trading partners? And anyways, the West is energy dependent on Russia, and if the West stops buying Russian oil and gas, the Western economy is going to collapse, leaving China, India still strong. So yeah, I think that in some ways the West could have miscalculated this, and basically my conclusion is what I see could be happening and what we could see in the next 10 years is basically the creation of 2 polar world orders, where you have the sort of Western bloc and then the Eastern bloc. The Eastern would be China, Russia, India, and perhaps some other countries, and then the Western would be the Western. And so it almost feels like there's a new world alliance forming before our very eyes that have more people, or certainly the same, and very large economy to create a completely different system to the one we know today. So could we see through this war in Ukraine, and I don't really talk about this here, but the lockdowns of the last 2 years have completely ravished Western economies. The absolute stupid idea of locking down an economy has completely ruined the Western economies. So are we looking at before our very eyes the formation of a completely different system to the one we know, that perhaps has a different reserve currency. Very interesting times, and something to think about. Has the West actually miscalculated these sanctions and miscalculated themselves, and maybe things are not as they seem on social media? Anyway, some food for thought. I'm not saying I'm right, but something to think about based on the data of GDP, population size, and the vote of the UN. Let's think about this. Have a fantastic day.